Hey gang, how's it going? Jonathan Stark here. I had a question in my group coaching this week that I thought would be really helpful to pretty much anybody that's doing freelancing or consulting. And that is how to get around a gatekeeper in accounts payable who doesn't want to pay you when you're supposed to be paid. So the scenario that came up with my student was that he had come to an agreement with the CEO where he said, "Hey, how about we do this advisory retainer month to month?" And the CEO said, "Great, let's do that." And my student said, "Okay, it's paid 100% upfront at the beginning of each month." And the CEO was a little bit uncomfortable with that because they hadn't met before for whatever reason and wanted to do net 30. So, in other words, have my students send the CEO an invoice, and then within the next 30 days, they would pay it. Student was not comfortable with that. Lots of people have been burned by that. So they came to an agreement where instead of net 30, it was net 7. So my student would get paid at least in the first week of the month. So he would, so that the two parties could sort of meet in the middle with a level of trust that was appropriate for the relationship that they had at that time. Okay, so they came to an agreement and contract signed, and my student sent the invoice to the accounts payable email address that the CEO indicated. And the accounts payable replied, "Oh, sorry, we just do net 30 and we only send out payments on the 15th and the 30th." So, tough, basically. And so the question was, do you get into it with the accounts payable person? What do you do? So the temptation, I think, is to get into an email chain with accounts payable, but that's not the right thing to do. You have an agreement with the CEO. There's absolutely no reason to engage with this person who's farther down the totem pole, who's probably just doing their job. The CEO probably didn't think to mention that there was going to be an exception to the situation, and they might be a little bit have their feathers ruffled because the CEO didn't really clear this with them. Now they're going to have to do something special and unusual outside of their normal process, which makes more work for them. So here's what to do. Don't reply to the AP, the accounts payable person at all. Just send an email to the CEO and say, "Oh, looks like accounts payable wasn't notified about our unusual situation. Could you do me a favor and let them know about that?" So don't even engage with accounts payable. It's just a waste of your time and theirs, and it probably could get a little bit stressful. And then make them resent you longer term. And sure enough, that's what I recommended in the case of my student. And immediately the CEO replied to the student, my student, and said, uh, CC'd accounts payable and said, please pay student uh, per terms of the contract. The contract is net 7. Please pay him net 7. And end of story, done deal. So, in a situation where you've got someone pushing back, especially if it's someone who is lower on the totem pole, um, isn't familiar with the details, just don't even waste their time or yours. Just go back to your buyer, and usually your buyer, especially if it's the CEO, but if you're dealing with someone farther up the food chain, they can make any exception they want. No matter what accounting says, the CEO or a real economic buyer can make things happen if they want to make things happen. He could put it on a credit card if he wanted to. So there's all sorts of options. The real economic buyer, they can't reasonably throw in your face that, "Oh, sorry, the accounting system we have only sends out checks on the 30th." Like, no, that's not the way it works. I'm sure any CEO is not a victim of their procurement software. Okay, so hopefully that helps people. If you ever do end up in a situation where you're getting pushback from accounts payable or procurement after you've come to an agreement with a high level executive, just don't go there and just go back to your buyer. And they will. I've never heard of a case where they said, "Oh, sorry." They will always just tell accounts payable to honor the contract. That's the agreement. Cool. Hope that helps someone. If you have any questions, you can throw them in the comments if you're watching the recording here. Let me take a quick. Oh, it looks like some comments are coming in now. Um, Okay, one person is suggesting CCing the CEO. I wouldn't do that, and here's why. So you could reply back to accounts payable, CC the CEO. I wouldn't do that because that is a status move, and that is going to make I think that's more likely to make the accounts payable person feel bad. It's you as an outsider pulling rank on accounts payable. So I would just contact the CEO and let them deal with it in a way that is going to make the AP person the most comfortable because they know accounts payable and they are going to know how to address that in a way that is not going to ruffle any feathers. If you do reply to the AP person and say, no, this is what you're going to do, and I've CC'd the CEO, that is a power move, and it's not gonna it's actually potentially puts the CEO in an uncomfortable position where now the employee is angry at the CEO or angry in general, and you don't want them to be angry. So let the CEO handle it however they think is the right way. Maybe they'll go to the accounts payable person and say, you know what, Bob, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention this to you. I should have looped you in sooner, but I did agree with this guy that we would pay net seven. Can you make that happen for me? If you involve yourself in that conversation, then it can create an awkward situation for the executive. So I wouldn't do that. Let's see. Oh, some other Mustafa's got another comment. If you remember, I asked you about how much I should charge for email automation. My client agreed to 10,000 upfront and 5,000 after 3 months, and those 3 months are for adjusting and checking the numbers. Cool. Congratulations. That sounds like a success. Great. All right, folks. I just wanted to jump in real quick on a Friday afternoon and share that piece of information. I think it's a pretty straightforward one for you. Just don't get into it and let your buyer handle it however they think is appropriate. They'll honor the deal. They just agree to it. Cool. Everybody have a great weekend. See you next week.